Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about 3 discs that I wish I had bought sooner. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because I've been playing disc golf for about a year and a half, and before I owned a disc golf shop, I was pretty limited to what I could buy. I typically just bought from Play It Again, bought a bunch of used discs, and didn't even know that you could really like what to buy. And so basically when I found a disc that I liked, I kind of just kept it and didn't really think about switching or experimenting for a long time. And I figured that if you guys are in a similar phase or you kind of don't know what to try, I might as well share with you 3 discs that I really enjoyed and that I would say that these discs really drastically improved my game, and that without them I would be probably a much worse player, or I would be stuck where I was at. The first disc that I wish I bought way sooner was the Innova Toro. So early on when I started playing, I didn't really have an approach disc. For most of my approaches early on, I used an Electron Nomad or a Baseline Maiden, and I soon realized 6 months in that when I started to progress and become a slightly better player, that I kind of needed a disc to where I would throw it flat. If I threw it flat, it would just travel to the left instead of me throwing on a bunch of hyzer and not have a lot of control. And so the first disc I actually bought was a Zone, and I remember trying it out and I didn't really like it because of how pinched it felt in my hand. The disc kind of felt weird. It felt like it was, when I grip it like in power grip, it felt like it was pinching on my fingernails, and so it was uncomfortable every time I used it. And so the second disc I bought was this Innova Toro, and I fell in love with it right away. And what originally it served for was obviously for stock hyzer approaches, whether it be from 200 to 250 feet, but it soon evolved into something much bigger and much better and way more versatile in my bag. And now what I learned is that the Champion, at least specifically these Champion Toros, beat in to fly really straight. So I'll show it in a video, but this disc specifically flies similar to an Envy, to where if I push it really flat and really put a lot of power into it, it will just glide straight. It might even put a little bit of turn into it if I throw it flat, and then slowly drift back. And the best part about it is that I could use it on approach shots where my arm speed's much slower and I'm just using it for touchy up shots, and it'll hyzer out nicely without having too much glide. The reason it changed my game is because it's not only controllable, but it's also really consistent with its flight. So I know what it's gonna do, and I know every time I throw it on an approach shot, it's not gonna glide too much, and it's just gonna hit the ground, skip up slowly to the basket. Or if I throw it from like further away, like 270-ish feet around its max distance, I could throw it dead straight down a tunnel, throw it as hard as I want, and get minimal fade or minimal skip or fade at the end, which is great. Since I've found this disc, I actually couldn't find a replacement for a long time, but since then I have found a replacement, and it was this Calvin Heimberg Tour Series Toro. I don't know what run this is or what year it's from, but it's definitely a little bit more puddle top comparative to this one. So this one kind of has a little bit of a dip similar to a Zone, while this one is relatively flat. But I'm glad because this one flies nearly identical to this one, so if I ever lose this, I have a backup at least. And then also, what I also love about the versatility of the Toro is I also have a new one in the bag, and this one is super overstable, kind of like a meat hook. So if I ever want to really get left, or there's ever a lot of headwind, I could trust this disc to go to the left and hit my target every single time. So that's the first disc. If you're looking for an approach disc and a Zone or any other disc isn't working for you, a Harp, Tactic, I would highly recommend trying an Innova Toro, especially if you have much smaller hands, because the grip is fairly medium to slightly shallow. So yeah, moving on to the second disc, I have the MVP Detour. Just to explain a little bit about my game before I get into this disc, I typically like to release my discs pretty flat, or a little bit of hyzer on video. I don't really notice it, but I'm trying to throw flat, but I throw a little bit of hyzer. And so it's really hard for me to put flex lines on a disc to where they'll turn to where I could put a flex on a disc accurately and have like a nice S shape, or to like get through a gap where I need to move to the right before finishing to the left. Also, I don't have a forehand, or a forehand that's significant enough to use on the tee pad of a hole. I really struggle with using discs and having them finish to the right. I'm a righty backhand, lefty forehand, so at least when I used to play a long time ago, I would use lefty forehand with either the Toro I just talked about or something overstable, and just put it on a bunch of anhyzer and try to dig it into the ground to finish to the right. And that probably cost me a lot of strokes. For a long time, I actually just didn't have a slot for a year. After a year of playing, I was kind of just doing the same thing until I figured I should try an understable mid-range that'll try to glide out to the right. Typically when I tried some understable stuff, wasn't a mid-range, but I originally tried like a disc drive heat. I kind of just don't have the angle control to where I could flip it up and drift it to the right nicely. I like throwing my disc flat, like I said, and having them do the work for me. And this was kind of the first disc when I picked it up, really wants to do exactly what I want it to do. So if I need to have a forehand line to where it finishes to the right, I can throw it out wide, throw it out flat, and the Detour will just slowly drift over to the right. It won't dump to the right, and it'll kind of pan slowly back to flat and kind of skip straight towards the target, which is really nice. A little bit of a notice for this disc though is that it's not as understable, I believe, as the flight numbers indicate. It's probably a little bit more stable. So if you're throwing 300-ish feet or 320-ish feet or less, this disc will probably be a little bit more stable than you think, because it's so flat on the top that if you don't get it up to speed, it won't want to turn at all. And so I know that when discs are flat, that they typically want to just knife right or left, comparative to a domey disc that wants to glide from right to left very slowly instead of knifing right to left. And so I feel like this disc is typically viewed as overstable for people with slower arm speeds. So it might not be super useful if you're throwing 300 feet or less, but for people that throw above 300 feet, I noticed that when most people throw it, they can throw it flat and have it turn very slowly to the right, or a little bit of hyzer and have it flip over and turn to the right very nicely. And luckily I don't have to worry about angle control as much. And so if there's ever a forehand line where I need a disc to drift from left to right, this is what I pull out. And so this has saved me tons of strokes on the course because I never had a forehand, and all the other reasons I mentioned before. If you're looking for a disc like that, or you don't have a forehand, highly recommend a Detour if you're throwing above 300 feet. And even if you're not throwing above 300 feet, this disc would be pretty good for straight shots. And if you put a little bit of anhyzer on it, it'll be a pretty far flying mid-range. So check one out. I'll leave it in the description below. Moving on to my third and final disc, I wish I bagged significantly earlier. It would be the Halo TL3. My local course is at De La Viega, which is a very tight wooded course with lots of trees in the way. And you need to be able to essentially, in most pin positions, throw straight with little fade or throw straight with a little bit of hyzer. I used to try to throw a lot of destroyers or a lot of distance drivers when I was first starting, and I soon realized that it's really hard to control a distance driver on a 360 foot shot and that's very tightly wooded. I needed to test some discs out, and I tried a bunch, didn't find any that I really liked until I found the Halo TL3. I fell in love with it when I first started throwing it. I can basically throw, not specifically this one, but this one flat. It's pretty hard, 80 to 90%, and it will get maybe a little bit of turn, but it'll always fade at the end, and it'll go straight forever for a really long time. And if I put 100% power and just like maybe this much hyzer, it'll baby flip up and just push straight forever. It's headwind resistant, it's good in tailwind, whatever you want. It's a perfect driver if you want it to go straight. And so for people that throw between 300 all the way up to 450 feet of power, for 450 feet of power, you probably have to throw it on a little bit of hyzer, have it flip up, but it'll just keep going forever. For people that throw 300 feet, probably have to throw it on a little bit of ante, but it'll still carry straight and fade a little bit at the end. I know for a fact that without this disc, I would be losing tons of strokes on the course. And I feel like, or when I first bought one, I felt like nobody or used TL3s, and so it was funny. But the more I play tournaments, I feel like I see people using them here and there. And ever since I opened up my shop, I've been recommending this disc heavily, and I feel like everybody that's tried it has loved it. So I figured I might as well share with you guys that the value that this disc has brought to me, and hopefully that this disc can bring to you. Also, shout out to a guy I just played a tournament with, Evan. He gave me this TL3. He hasn't used it. He noticed that I was throwing this one, and funny enough, he had one with a similar black rim and gave it to me, so shout out to Evan. I used this one as my backup to my main TL3, who I also got from a buddy at my shop. And then this one's kind of slightly flippier, where I'll use it in tailwind, or if I want a disc to finish, I throw flat and I have it like flex just a little bit to the right before finishing. One important note is that if you want a more stable TL3, typically they'll be a lot flatter on the top, but don't be fooled by the shoulder. So you'll want a disc, sadly don't have one, but you'll want the TL3 to be pretty flat on top, but not have a high shoulder right here, because it'll make it more understable. And typically you don't want it to have a pop top like this, but this one's luckily just stable enough for me to throw dead straight. This one's even a little bit more overstable, has a little bit less of a pop top. So if you want one that's more understable, you throw maybe between 300 to 350 feet. I would throw one with a big pop top. If you want one that's more stable, I would try to find one that's a lot flatter and has not too big of a high of a shoulder up here. But besides that, those were the 3 discs that I wish I had bought a lot sooner. I hope you found this video informational, helpful, and maybe inspire you to buy a couple of these discs or just try something new in general. These were just 3 discs that I wish I had bought sooner. There are plenty more that I could talk about, but I don't want to make this video too long. And before I end it, just want to thank you guys for watching. Yeah, I appreciate all the support these past couple months, and sorry again for not uploading these past couple weeks. It's just been a really busy few weeks with tournaments and just stuff at the shop. Before I end the video, I forgot to say that I have a question for you guys. Lately I've been struggling to find a disc that is similar to the Detour but of higher speed, to where I could throw it really flat and it'll just drift over to the right and slowly come back, but not to where I have to really put a lot of hyzer on it. So if you guys have any suggestions for a fairway driver or a distance driver that does that, comment it down below. That'd be greatly appreciated. I'll definitely try it out soon. But as always, I really appreciate the support. If you want to check out my website at www.disczone.com, I have all of these discs on my website. You can check them out. If you guys have any specific questions, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can send me a DM on Instagram. Pretty available all the time, so I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. But as always, thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.